Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Can I move this forward? Hi everybody, I'm Karen Garrison and I'm an alcoholic. And it's through the grace of God and the power of Alcoholics Anonymous that I've been sober since May 30th, 1982. And that doesn't make me a miracle, it makes AA a miracle. And if you're new here tonight, I want to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I always call it God's magnificent AA, the program that saved my life and it's going to save yours too, if you want to take a few quick actions. And I suggest strongly you get a sponsor tonight, that you get that book Alcoholics Anonymous, and you get busy and do everybody else is doing around here, and you're going to stay sober as I've stayed sober for 18 years. And people like me cannot stay sober, I can guarantee you. My home group is the Pacific Group in West LA, a group I'm very, very proud to be a member of, just as I'm sure you're proud to be a member of yours. And I guess if you're not proud, you got to get a job in it. You might change your mind. I certainly have a job, mine, and I'm proud to have that job. I want to thank Tammy and the committee for inviting me to come over to Nevada for this conference. This is an honor and a privilege. It's one that I do not take lightly, I'll guarantee you. You guys, I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I really do. And I think that it shows. And I make an awful lot of mistakes and I do an awful lot of things wrong. But I'll tell you one thing, that I love you. Make no mistake about that. You know, I've been taught to do an awful lot of things before I ever opened my big mouth. And one thing is to talk to my sponsor, and Clancy sends you his love and very best wishes tonight. And if anybody in this room is wondering why I have a man for a sponsor and why I have Clancy for a sponsor, it's really quite simple. I did not get sober in California. I got sober in a place called Lincoln, Nebraska. It was just a terrible place to get sober, if you want to know the truth. And I was not doing well in Alcoholics Anonymous in Nebraska. I went through 19 sponsors at a rapid clip, and I'm certainly not proud of it as I stand here tonight. And thank God for the old-timers in AA, because somebody loved me enough to get my current sponsor. And I got to tell you that my life has done nothing but totally, completely turn around as a result of that. And I absolutely adore the ground that man walks on. I talked to him before I left LA, and he said, well, get up there and share your experience, your strength, and your hope, and tell those people what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. Ignore the old-timers. They got it. They don't need your inspiration, my dear. And talk directly to those new people, the life and blood of AA. And I believe that as I stand here, and I welcome you, and I hope that you stay in. Then I think I did, without a doubt, the most important thing I can ever do. And that's to say, God, please help me say what you want me to say to these people. God is very much a part of my life tonight, you guys, and it did not used to be that way for me, I can guarantee you. You know, like I said earlier, my sobriety is May 30th, 1982. It was not always my sobriety date. When I got my current sponsor, I had to change that date, and there's a reason for that. I'm one of these people that had gotten smoked dope when I got sober. And, you know, if you're smoking marijuana in this room now, you are not sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I will tell you right this minute. And I don't want to argue about it afterwards. Ask any old-timer if you don't believe me. And if I have to change my date, then by God, so do you. But anyway, I got my current sponsor, and I tried to explain to him that where I'm from in Lincoln, Nebraska, you can have two sobriety dates, one from alcohol and one from drugs. And he pointed out to me that I was in Southern California. We have one date and to get my date changed. And I was such a smart aleck when I got my current sponsor, and I said, where does the book mention pot? He said, well, the book does mention pot. And I said, Clancy, I have read that book. It does not talk about marijuana in that book. And he said, if I find the word pot in that book, will you change your sobriety, never argue with me again? And I knew I was making a bad deal, you guys, but I did anyway. And I'll be damned if he didn't flip open the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And on the first page of Bill Wilson's story, it says, died by musket or by pot. I said, that is not what that means. He said, quite frankly, my dear, I don't care what it means. You said the book didn't mention pot. It does mention pot. Change your sobriety date. And my life has flourished, I got to tell you guys. But, you know, I'm just delighted to be here tonight. I'm also delighted that you don't have a glass podium. You can see your speaker. I had this terrible experience on the East Coast. I was out there giving a talk, and right in my talk, my skirt fell off in front of 3,000 people. And then this glass podium, you could actually see the speaker and stuff, and that makes me nervous anyway. And anyway, I had this black suit on with this wraparound skirt, and the button came in, and I thought, my God, my skirt's going to fall on the floor. And it was too late. It was on the floor. But you guys, you know what? Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me to wear underwear, and thank God I had some on, I'll tell you. It's also taught me to take action. And I just picked up that skirt and kept right on talking. What else are you going to do? But anyway, I have to tell you guys what happened to me in May. Tonight when the gentleman was reading chapter 5, I really picked up on that amends step. And, if you're new here tonight, we have an amends step in Alcoholics Anonymous, and we're supposed to make restitution and make amends to people that we've harmed and stuff. And, 25 years ago, I found myself in Winnipeg, Canada, coming out of a blackout, and going 90 miles an hour in a stolen car is what I was doing. And I had no idea where the hell I even was. And I thought, what am I doing in Winnipeg, Canada? And last I remember, I was in North Dakota visiting a boyfriend of mine, and I didn't know that car was stolen, or I wouldn't have taken it. And I don't know how you report a stolen car stolen, but by God, he did. And here I am, coming out of a blackout, going 90 miles an hour, and I thought, oh my God, where am I and stuff? And my perceptions of reality have always been so distorted, you guys, I can't begin to tell you. And I think of the Mounties as on horses chasing you. I don't know they're in cars chasing you, but anyway, I got pulled over by this Mountie, and he walked up to the door of my car, and he said, young lady, do you know how fast you were going? And I said, no. And he said, get out of the car, I smell alcohol. And I said, I don't live in your country, and you can't tell me what to do. Don't ever say that to the Royal Canadian Police. And I found out you can exit a car more than one way that night, I'll tell you. And that guy literally jerked me out the side window, and I took my purse with me, and it had a chain on it, and I hit this guy in the forehead is what I did. And you guys, the blood just flew, and I thought, boy, Karen, you have done it now and stuff. And this guy literally brought him to his knees and stuff, and I thought, oh. Anyway, I got arrested for that, obviously, and I spent 10 days in the Winnipeg jail, and during my jail time there, a member of Alcoholics Anonymous came to visit me, and I will never forget this. I wasn't ready for AA yet, but I'll never forget this guy, and he knocked on my jail cell door, and he said, I'm from AA. Would you like us to be of service to you? And I thought, be of service to me? Yeah, you can just get away from my jail cell is what I said. And he said, I'm that Mountie's brother, and you really hurt him bad, Karen. You are in big trouble here, Have you ever thought that maybe you're an alcoholic? And I thought, how dare you say that to me? But anyway, he said, well, if you ever need us, we'll be there, And I never forgot that guy. He planted a seed for me that stayed with me till the day I got sober. And anyway, obviously I got in a lot of trouble. That cost me about $10,000 to get out of that. And I got my current sponsor, and about 17 years ago I read my inventory to him, and he said, you find that Mountie and you make amends to him. And I'm more than willing to do that, you guys, because I know what happens when you make amends around here. The promises come true in your life and stuff. And I like the feeling that you get, but I still balk at every single one. We're not saints here, trust me. But anyway, so I called up to Winnipeg, and I talked to the people up there, and they said, we have no idea who you're talking about. We destroy the records up here after 5 years. And I said, oh, you have to find my Mountie. I have to find him. And they said, lady, leave us alone. We're busy, And I told my sponsor, and he said, well, you tried to do it. He said, keep your eye open and be of service. And I thought, what kind of a dumb sponsor do I have? Keep your eye open and be of service. But, that's exactly what happened, let me tell you guys. But anyway, last May I boarded a flight out of LAX to go to Calgary, Canada, and give a talk. And every time I go to Canada, the hair on my neck stands straight up. I'm scared I'm going to get in trouble again up there. And, that mess is cleaned up there, but I still get scared when I go to Canada. And anyway, I won't mention the airline, but they fly in the friendly skies, and I had mechanical failure at LAX, and we're down on the ground an hour and a half longer. And the people on that airplane were just in a rage, you guys. You ought to have seen them. And I thought, why don't you settle down? We're powerless, obviously. And I sat down next to this elderly gentleman, and I say good morning to him and stuff. I don't like to talk to people on planes because I bring my dirty books with me, and I just want to read them. But anyway, I said hello to him and sat down, and he said, you look so familiar to me. And I said, oh, really? And I thought, shut up and leave me alone. I want to read my book. But anyway, I was nice and stuff. And funny that we got in the air, and San Francisco held us 4 times. We ran out of fuel. We had to land in San Jose. And by this time, I was in a rage, let me tell you. And I'd missed my Friday night talk, and on and on and on. And anyway, my sponsors taught me that when I'm in a rage like that, I have been doing something real quick to change my behavior, because I'm about ready to make a total ass out of myself. And so I asked this guy, I said, I noticed that you have a cast on your leg. Can I get you a cup of coffee? And he said, well, that'd be very nice if you would do that. And I said, okay. So I got him his coffee and sat back down. And he said, why do you look so familiar to me? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, why are you going to Canada? And I said, well, actually, I'm going to go up there and give an AA talk. I don't mind telling people that. And he said, oh, really? My brother's in AA. I said, really? And he said, my brother's going to be 42 years sober. And I said, oh, how wonderful. So's my sponsor. And he said, well, who's your sponsor? And I told him. He said, well, I heard Clancy talk up here. He said, I went with my brother to a convention to support him and stuff. And I said, well, small world, isn't it? And stuff. And he said, did you ever get in trouble in Canada? And I I thought, this is really weird. And I said, well, I presume that you're retired. What did you do for a living? He said, well, I was a Mountie. I said, really? What province? And he told me, and you guys, he lifted up a lock of hair. And there was a scar from 25 years ago where I'd hit that guy in the forehead. And I just sat on that plane and I just sobbed like a baby. And he said, Karen, will you please be quiet? Everybody's staring at us. And I said, I don't care. I found my Mountie. I can't believe it. And that was my last amend I had to make. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry that I did that to you. And he said, oh, forget about it. He said, you paid my hospital bill. And I said, no, that's not the point. I have to do something to make this right. And he said, all right, you can wait on me the rest of the trip. And I thought, okay, I'm more than willing to do that. And he said, I know what we can do. We can call my brother. And I thought, let's do it and stuff. So he said, well, get out your credit card. There's the telephone. And I thought, damn, this is going to cost me $25 a minute. But I was more than willing to do that. And our book says we go to any lengths here. And so we called his brother, and his brother was so excited, you guys, I can't begin to tell you. And he said, oh, Karen, this is wonderful. He said, I've thought about you so many times over the years. And he said, they talked about you at the Mountie police station for years, that how did he let a little 110-pound woman bring him to his knees? And they just teased him unmercifully about that. But anyway, I said, will you do me a favor? I said, will you call my sponsor in L.A. and please tell him what's going on in this airplane? I said, I can't seem to get through to L.A. And he said, oh, I'd be delighted to do that. So he called my sponsor. And you know what my sponsor said? It just amazes me. He said to this guy, I told her to be of service 17 years ago to keep her eye open, and by God, that's exactly what she did. It turned out for her, and she's made her last amendment in Alcoholics Anonymous from the wreckage of my past. So, see, even sponsors know what they're talking about, don't they, folks? But anyway, I wanted to share that with you guys. I was so happy, you guys. I can't begin to tell you. And, he sent me a picture of the jail cell I was in, and I think this has gone way beyond what it's supposed to go. But anyway, we're commuting back and forth and stuff. But anyway, you guys, the day I got sober, I weighed 95 pounds. I was the color of squash. Had an alcoholic hepatitis. I had a liver cirrhosis. I had ruptured esophageal varices. And if you don't know what that stuff is, you don't want to know this, because you die from that kind of stuff. And I was standing on Skid Row in Lincoln, Nebraska, sucking on a bottle of Mad Dog. And if you guys haven't drank Mad Dog, I need to tell you, it's not one of your finer wines, I can assure you. I'll guarantee you one thing, that crap has never seen a grape, make no mistake about that. And I literally could not believe what's going on in my life. I'd lost my children. I'd lost my husband twice. I don't really care about that, I want you to know. I'd lost my car. I'd lost my house. I destroyed every relationship I'd ever had with anybody. And I was clearly dying from alcoholism. And then I lost the one thing that brought me my Nielsen's disease. I lost my nursing license. And you guys, I love my profession. It absolutely devastated me, but it did not stop me from drinking. And there's a reason for that, and it was read here tonight, that I have an obsession that somehow, someday, I will learn to control and enjoy my drinking. The persistent illusion is astonishing, just like our book talks about. Many of us pursue it in the gates of insanity and death. And I'll guarantee you one thing. I was in the gates of insanity, got sober, and almost into my coffin. And I am so grateful for this program as I stand here tonight. I cannot begin to tell you. And you're going to soon see why and stuff. But you guys did not start out my life with me standing on Skid Row, I got to tell you. I come from a wonderful home there in Nebraska, and I want you to know that, and my mother wanted you to know it too, I'll guarantee you that. My mom died 8 years ago, and I miss her so much I can't begin to tell you. And boy, you only get one, and when they're gone, let me tell you. And I made amends to her many, many years ago, and we had a wonderful relationship last few years of her life and stuff. But God, I just miss her terribly. And you know what I miss about her the most? I know this sounds absolutely ridiculous, but every time I go speak somewhere, I call her up and she'd say, why do you have to get up there and tell those people all that stuff about you? They're not going to like you. I'd always say, Mom, the rottener you are in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more people love you. And she'd say, well, I don't understand that. And I said, well, you don't have to understand it. And she'd say, and don't tell those people that you're afraid, because they don't like people that are afraid. And I'd say, Mom, the more afraid you are in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more people love you. And one more time she'd say, I don't get it. And why would she get it, you guys? She wasn't an alcoholic. And then she always ended up by saying to me, and I used to love to hear this, and I'd pride into give an opportunity. She'd say, I'm going to tell you something, young lady. You come from good stock, and we don't air our dirty laundry in public. And I'd always say, Mom, it's not dirty anymore. And she didn't understand that either. But, I just miss her so much. And, I come from an alcoholic home, and I don't think that's neither here nor there. I don't do well with people who stand at AA podiums and blame anybody for anything. And my father died from this disease on the streets of Chicago in 1979. And you tell me how a major in the Air Force dies on Skid Row. I don't know how that happened, other than the fact that he was an alcoholic. And whether he ever found AA or not, I do not know. I just know that he certainly did not stay sober as a result of it. And, one more time tonight, this is a cunning, baffling, powerful disease that kills people. This is not a game I'm playing up here. This is serious business. And I would give anything in the world if my father were alive tonight, because we would have a lot to talk about, I can tell you. you. I have a sister who was Miss Rah-Rah in high school and homecoming queen and cheerleading and all that kind of stuff, and made straight A's and never cracked a book, and I made straight F's and never cracked a book, and that was the difference. My sister was a beautiful little girl. She's a gorgeous woman today. She looks nothing like I do, I got to tell you. And she was a model for many, many years for Neiman Marcus in Dallas, and retired. Now she's teaching school in the West Indies. And I got to tell you guys, as a direct result of this program, I love my sister very, very much tonight. And I found out something about her. She's also very beautiful on the inside, too, and I never used to know that. I have a brother who's a pilot in the Navy in Spain who got from Operation Desert Storm not too long ago. As a matter of fact, about a year and a month ago tonight, my brother was over Iraq. He's a fighter pilot and stuff. And, you know, we were growing up, I thought my brother was such a dork, you guys. I really did. Straight as an arrow Mike, doesn't drink, doesn't use drugs, doesn't screw around. He was an embarrassment to me, if you want to know the truth. And tonight I'm so proud of my brother, I can't begin to tell you. You wouldn't catch me over Iraq in any fighter plane, but neither one of these people are alcoholic. And I have another sister who's married the public defender in Lincoln, Nebraska, who got me out of a whole bunch of trouble when I got sober, and I'm welcome in their homestay, and I never used to be. I come from basically a very boring family, if you want to know the truth. They're highly successful people, and they bore me to tears, I got to tell you guys. I have a couple kids who are 39 and 40 years old, and I know I certainly don't look old enough to have kids that age, but by God, I sure do. And this is where it really starts getting interesting for me. These kids are anything but boring, I got to tell you. As a matter of fact, they're a couple of jerks, if you want to know the truth. You know, I love my kids very, very much. Please don't get me wrong. But those couple of jerks have given me 5 of the most gorgeous grandbabies you've ever seen before in your life and stuff. And, you know, I hate to be a bragging grandmother from podiums, but I just hate people that do this. But when I do it, it's a whole different ball game, let me tell you. But I have a beautiful grandson I want to just tell you quickly about. And Ryan is just a beautiful kid, you guys. He's 11 years old, and I just adore this baby and stuff. And anyway, he's quite a little gymnast and stuff. And my son and his wife got a phone call from Budweiser out of St. Louis, Missouri, wanting to sponsor this kid and train him for the Olympics, you guys. And my son called me and he said, Mom, what do you think? And my kids rarely ask me for advice. And I wanted to shriek at him and say, let him go, you idiot. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. And, you know, I jumped from phone call to Olympic Stadium, gold medal around his neck, and what will I wear, you know? And it happens just that quick for me. But I found myself saying to my child, you know, Jeff, he's your child. You have to do what you think is right. And he said, Mom, he's so little and stuff. And I said, I don't know. But I said, I know one thing. We have a friend in Nebraska who's a child psychologist. I said, why don't you have Chris come over and talk to Ryan and see what he thinks? And he said, okay, we can do that. So he did exactly that. And you know what that child psychologist told my son and his wife? Let him go. It's the opportunity of a lifetime. So I'm happy to report here tonight that my little grandson is in Norman, Oklahoma, training at Nadia Comaneci and Bart Connor's clinic down there. And I'm so proud of that kid, I can't begin to tell you. And, you know, you guys, he called me on my 18th AA birthday in May. And he said, Grandmother, this is Ryan. He said, I'm so sorry to call you so late. Happy AA 18th birthday. And I got to tell you guys something. That kid has never seen me drink. He has no idea what the hell he's even talking about. But he knows one thing, how important this is to me and stuff. And he honors that with his grandmother. And he said, Grandma, he said, you know, when can I go to a meeting with you again? And when are you going to be home? And I want to go with you and stuff. And, you know, it's not a good idea to talk in front of your family, I got to tell you guys. My little grandson was appalled when he heard me speak. But apparently he liked it. He wants to come back again. But I'm so proud of that child. And I don't know what's going to happen with that. It doesn't make any difference what happens with it. I just know that I'm so proud of him. I can't begin to tell you and stuff. But anyway, you guys, when I was growing up in Nebraska, I was just a disruptive jerk is what I was. Always in trouble. Always kicked out of classrooms. I hated discipline. I was very, very rebellious. I really hated people telling me what to do. And I like it even less today, if you want to know the truth. And, you know, I never felt like I belonged anywhere. And I hear that a lot from AA podiums, and I'm right on with that 125%, I got to tell you. You know, I really don't remember my first drink, you guys, but I can tell you that I hope to God I never forget my last one. And I hope it was my last one. But I remember what alcohol did for me from the very beginning. It made me feel like I belonged. I could be anything I wanted to be. I could do anything I wanted to do. I drank at any given opportunity after that, and I was probably about 13 years old. You know, I realize that I'm in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous tonight, and I honor your podium by talking about alcoholism up here. I used a lot of drugs too. I need to make that a small part of my story. My sponsor encourages me to do that. And, you know, when I was growing up in Nebraska, there just wasn't a lot of drugs on the street. But I'll guarantee you I found every single one of those drugs. And, you know, there was some marijuana and speed and stuff. And today if you get caught for possession of marijuana, you get a ticket, big deal. When I was growing up, you went to prison is what happened to you. And that didn't scare me. Nothing scared me. Everything I wasn't supposed to be doing. And I'm one of these alcoholic females, and I hate to say this from an AA podium, but it's precisely the way that it was for me. And we're supposed to tell the truth up here. That if you pat me on the head, my pants fall off is what happens to me. And I got myself into a lot of trouble when I was growing up. I absolutely love men. I love everything about them. You name it about, and I love it about them. They've been the downfall of my entire existence, and they remain the same today, I'm sorry to say. And I particularly like sick men, and there's a room full of them here tonight. I can just feel it, you know. That's one thing, girls, I love about Southern California. It has got so many sick men, and I'm just entertained around the clock 24 hours a day. And I have to tell you guys a funny story. I was in Nashville, Tennessee about, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years ago giving a talk, and one of the fine ladies of Nashville, Tennessee AA walked up to me afterwards, I want you to know, and this woman said to me, she said, "You're disgusting." And she wasn't kidding, you guys. She meant every word of it. And I said, "Lady, from where I come from, being disgusting is a step up, I can assure you." And furthermore, if I wanted you to sponsor me, I'd flown to Nashville and asked you. You know, I hear some women get this podium, and I wonder if they ever drank, you guys. I really do. Do all their drinking in one room instead of shooting through the keyhole with an eyedropper. I was out there big time. I got myself into a lot of trouble. I've been taught to share that freely in Alcoholics Anonymous. And if I offend anybody in this room tonight, I would never offend anybody in the program that saved my life, let me tell you. And besides that, my book tells me, and this is my favorite part of our book, it says, "Cling to the thought that in God's hands your dark past will be the greatest possession that you have." And it goes on to say, because you can literally avert death and misery for others. And I found that to be very, very true in my sobriety. So if I offend anybody here, now I don't want to hear about it afterwards either. But anyway, I got pregnant when I was 16 years old, and I had to get married. And as it must be, I married an alcoholic. Don't most alcoholic women? I go for colorful, exciting men that beat the hell out of me and all kinds of stuff. And he wasn't even a man, you guys. He was only 17 and I was 16. I couldn't cook. I couldn't clean. I couldn't take care of a baby, nor did I want to take care of a baby. And before we knew it, we had 2 babies to take care of. And I quickly found out what caused all that, and I put a halt to it, I'll guarantee you that. And that caused me a lot of trouble throughout the years. And as it must be, I married an individual that refused to work, that drank on a daily basis, and he used to come home and beat me up on a daily basis. And I had never seen a man hit a woman before in my life, you guys. I'll guarantee you one thing. If my dad would lay one hand on my mom, she'd have knocked him from here to the moon, I got to tell you. And I grew to hate this guy very, very much, and I'm not blaming him for my disease. So please don't get me wrong. It's just part of my story, and I need to share it. And somebody in that family had to get a job, and I didn't finish junior high yet, for Christ's sakes. And I found a job as a nurse's aide at a hospital there in Lincoln, and the magic was put in my life. I literally fell in love with nursing, and I made a plan to myself. I would love to go to school, and I'd love to become a registered nurse. That's what I would love to do. You know, they say that alcoholics don't have willpower, and I'm here to tell you tonight from this podium that that is a bunch of crap. I have more willpower than 20 elephants. When I want to do well, I'm going to do well. I have no willpower as far as my disease goes, but when I want to do something, I'm going to do it. And I went back, I finished junior high, I finished high school, I went to college full-time for 3 years, and I worked full-time for 3 years. And I'm talking about 18, 20 hours a day, you guys, and that is hard stuff to do. I did not drink, not use any drugs during this period of time. At the age of 27 years old, I became a registered nurse. And if you think I'm proud to stand here tonight and tell you that I got jerked in front of the State Board of Nursing in Nebraska, and they told me, "You are a disgrace to your profession, you're a disgrace to nursing, you're a disgrace to medicine, you are no longer working because we just jerked your nursing license." If you think I'm proud of that, you are sadly wrong. You guys, I love my profession. I really, really mean that. And I would never do anything to jeopardize the people that I take care of, nor the people that I work with in ordinary circumstances. And what I have to tell you tonight is a story about how I threw it right down the toilet so I could drink. And that is total insanity. It's also called alcoholism. At the age of 27 years old, I divorced this man. And girls, I got to tell you that a whole new world opened up to me, and it's called men and alcohol. And I went absolutely hog wild is what I did. I was engaged 8 times during that divorce. I never did marry these people. 2 of them died from alcoholism. You know, I don't know anything about social drinking. I drank, and with alcoholics, and we do indeed die from this. And at the age of 27 years old, I went to work in surgery at a hospital there in Lincoln, and I had that job for 19 years. I love working in the operating room. I love taking care of those patients. It's a colorful, exciting nursing position. I drank, ran around with medical people mostly. They were colorful, intense people. They worked hard and they played hard. And I need to tell you guys that the incidence of alcoholism amongst my profession is tremendously high. And that'll do a lot for your security levels. You're going to have surgery next week. But it has to be very, very true. And those people are so grateful that I'm sober that they can't see straight. And I'm talking about alcoholics is what I'm talking about. You know, in our book, Alcoholics Anonymous, it says clearly that we're to tell in a general way what our drinking was like. And you're going to get the general idea real quick about what my drinking was like. I can tell you guys about my drinking in about 5 seconds flat, you know the truth. Many many years ago, I was at a concert in upstate New York called Woodstock. And that's exactly what my drinking was like. It was all about Woodstock. That Woodstock they had 4 summers ago was a piece of crap compared to the one I went to. There will never be another Woodstock, trust me on that. The kids from the 60s threw a party that nobody will ever match, I am quite sure. And New York got wind they're going to have this big event. And they told these people, if you don't get medical coverage, you're not going to have this concert. So they started hiring people from the Midwest because they thought we'd be more responsible. And we were a seedy lot, I can assure you. And I was the first alcoholic to sign up for this deal and find 9 girls I worked with to join me. And we met about 80 residents on the East Coast, and there we were at Woodstock. I never seen so much alcohol in one place in my entire life. You could have filled a battleship with no problem whatsoever. And the drugs, it was like a candy store. And we were sharing narcotics along with everybody else. And we had this great big semi-truck on that back lot of Woodstock. That was our hospital park back there. And I don't recall being in that semi the entire week. But I do recall what it was like to stand in front of the stage at night that Richie Havens sang Freedom, and Joe Cocker and Country Joe and Santana, those groups that I love. I come from the roaring 60s, you guys, and I love rock and roll, let me tell you. And things have not changed in my life one little tiny bit. I loved Elvis Presley, and Janis Joplin was my lady, let me tell you. Wouldn't Janis Joplin have been a fine member of Alcoholics Anonymous, you guys? I'd have hung out with Janis, let me tell you. I'd have traded Janis for Clancy any day of the week if he wanted the truth. Don't you tell him I said that, Bob D. My AA brother is in here tonight. He's going to tattle on me, I'm sure. That's a lie. I wouldn't trade my sponsor for 20 Janis Joplins. I really, really mean that. But, drinking for me at one time was a fun thing, you guys. It'd be a lie for me to stand up here tonight and say anything but that. But I cannot remember the fun after the pain that it caused me. And it almost cost my life. And one more time, I'm so grateful, you guys. I can't begin to tell you. But I'm going to give you a couple quick drinking stories and get my recovery here. I love the horse races, too. I love everything that's supposed to be doing. I've been to the horse races in Omaha, Nebraska with a couple of nurses that I worked with, and the girls told me, they said, Karen, the horse race has been over with for 3 hours. We're all drunk. Let's go back to Lincoln. And I said, well, run along. I'd met 2 guys from Council Bluffs, Iowa, and these guys wanted to take me to a party, and by God, I was going. Like I said, you pat me on the head, and I'll follow you anywhere you want to go. And I really can't tell you much about this party, the guys that I was with. I just know that I woke up out of a blackout on Highway 2 by Palmyra, Nebraska, a little bitty town of about 200 people, and I found out something very interesting tonight about Palmyra, Nebraska, that they take a dim view of naked women walking on their highways. I found that out. And there I was at 2 o'clock in the morning walking stark naked down the highway, and my high heels carrying my purse, and it was February in Nebraska, and it's a tad bit nippy out there in February in Nebraska to be doing that. And of all the luck, the first person I ran to was a highway patrolman. And, in Nebraska, the cops travel themselves. They don't have a partner. And where I'm from in California, they're a little bit smarter than that. And this guy stops his squad car, and he rolls down his window. He turns on his siren, and he looked at me, and he said, what are you doing? And I thought, well, that's about the stupidest thing I've ever heard anybody say. It's quite obvious what I was doing. He said, lady, you get in this squad car, and you sit down, and don't you touch me. Well, one thing about a person like myself, every time I'm in trouble, I'll do one thing more to make it worse every single time. And I looked at this cop, and I said, I'm not getting your squad car because you might try and rape me. He said, lady, I wouldn't bet any money on it. You are absolutely disgusting is what you are. And I'm here to tell you guys that made me madder than it was going on to show you how sick I was. And he had to get a matron out from the Palmyra, Nebraska City Jail to come out there and get me. And that woman was not pleased, I will guarantee you. They're very busy at that downtown jail. Now I have time for this foolishness. And I went downtown, booked in that cop's raincoat. Cops keep raincoats in the trunks of their car for these occasions. And I went downtown, booked for indecent exposure, for assault and battery, for kicking in his windshield, for hitting her, for hitting him, all the delightful antics that we pull as practicing alcoholics. And I will never forget how humiliating it was to be in that courtroom. The very next morning, standing in my raincoat, when my brother-in-law, the public defender in Lincoln, Nebraska, came walking up to me, and I didn't know he was working there that day. And he said, Karen, have you lost your marbles or what? Why would you do something like this? And you guys, I looked at my brother-in-law, and I was to say this to many, many people in my drinking career in many, many courtrooms. I said, oh, for Christ's sakes, Dennis, this could happen to anybody, That's the best I could do, folks, And I, honest to God, believe that. I really did, If you're going to drink, these things are going to happen occasionally, so what? And that cost me about $3,000 to get out of that, and I just shirked it off like it was no big deal. But I did learn one thing from that event I want to share with you, and this is all that I learned. Don't ever drink with men from Council Bluffs, Iowa, and I kept right on drinking. I will never forget what it felt like to wake up in the very hospital I worked at in surgery, in their emergency room, one more time coming out of a blackout, one more time I'd been to the horse races. For a number of years I thought the horse races were my problem. It certainly was not my drinking, and I'm one of these alcoholic females with a big mouth when I drink, and I have a big mouth in sobriety, but I can tell you the pain as a teacher here, it's getting a lot better. And I'd smart off some guy at that horse race track, and he belted me right in the teeth is what he did. And a plastic surgeon was putting 18 stitches in my mouth. And I'll never forget this guy, what he said to me, you guys, as long as I live, I'll never forget this. He said, Karen, we love you so much. What is wrong with you? You are such a good nurse and stuff. We think you're an alcoholic. Let's send you to a treatment center and get this drinking problem taken care of so you can get on with your life here. And you guys, I could not believe the audacity that man had that he would say that to me. I said, just fix my lip and get out of my face. I'll drink if I want to drink. And the drunk driving charges and the bad checks, all the stuff that we eventually do. My kids were in trouble. I never could marry these guys I was engaged to. They kept dying from alcoholism. And I thought to myself, I need to get married to my ex-husband again. That's what I need to do. The kids need their father. Besides that, I need to get even with him for all the things that he's done to me. And those are not very good reasons to get married again, I got to tell you. And I'm certainly not proud of it as I stand here tonight. And, if anybody in this room's thinking about getting married to the same person twice, don't do it. You're going to be sorry. The only way I can describe it is like taking a bite out of the same turd twice. I'm sorry, but that's the way I feel. And I danced that man. My sponsor's going to kill me because I said that. I danced that man through 3 of the most miserable years of his life on the face of this earth. And I love to tell you guys this story I'm about ready to tell you. And my sponsor always tells me that is not funny, and you should not be telling that from AA podiums. And I said, okay, fine, then I won't tell it anymore. And he said, no, go ahead and tell it and let those people see how sick you really were, and apparently how sick you really still are. And I'm still sick, and I still think it's funny, and I'm telling the story. When I married him again, I told him, I said, if you ever hit me again, buddy, I'll kill you next time you hit me. And he said, I'll never hit you again ever. And I said, you better see that you don't. And he lied is what he did. And he came home drunk one night. And I happened to be sober this night for some reason. And I'll never know why, because I usually wasn't. And girls, you know what guys do when they come home drunk? They want to take you to bed and stuff. And I was not buying it. If there's anything I can't stand, it's some drunk man mauling me when I'm sober. I will say that when the shoe's on the other foot, though, it's fine with me. And that guy came home and indicated that to me, and I said, you get your hands off me and leave me alone. I wanted nothing to do with him, period. And he broke my arm is what he did. And I'm here to tell you guys that I was mad. As a matter of fact, I'm still mad about it if you want to know the truth. And I told him, I said, you go to sleep on that couch, and so help me God, when you wake up, you're going to wish you'd never been born. And he sat up for hours, you guys, his eyes pried open. And as it must be, he finally passed out. And I started drinking martinis, and this is a classic example of what alcohol did for me. Alcohol told me what to do. I didn't tell it what to do. And I had about 8-10 martinis, and I was feeling no pain, I can assure you. And I was sitting there watching this guy. And I hate to tell you what this man was doing, but I can't tell you the story unless I tell you what he was doing. He was laying on the couch playing with himself. And I thought, you disgusting man, you make me sick to my stomach. And the more I drank, the madder I got. And you guys, I'm a nurse, and I'm very familiar with male anatomy. And I'd be very familiar with male anatomy if I wasn't a nurse. But anyway, I thought to myself, what can I do to get even with this guy for all the things that he's done to me? And I came with this brilliant idea in my drunken stupor. That's one thing we should never do, folks, is drink and think at the same time, I got to tell you. And this was many, many years ago, you guys, when super glue first came out. And super glue was powerful stuff. Mrs. Bobbitt has nothing on me, I can assure you. I was a foreigner before she ever got started. And I got that super glue out, and I read the directions on that super glue. And like I said, I was drunk, and I wasn't seeing very clearly. And what I thought those directions said were, if this hits human skin, you better get it off within 15 hours. Now, why would it say something stupid like that? What it said was, in fact, if this hits human skin, you better get it off within 5 minutes is what it said. And I went over to this man. I get so excited when I tell this story, I could just do it all over again. But I went over to this man, and I poured super glue all over this guy's groin, and I mean everywhere. There was not one place this man did not have super glue, and I laughed about it, and I went to bed. And I woke up in the morning to screams of horror like you cannot even believe. And, I did not mean to hurt this guy as bad as I did, and I swear to God that's true. But I'll tell you what happened to my ex-husband. This guy never had the advantage of being circumcised when he was born, and now he clearly was, I can assure you. And we had a telephone by our bed there, in our bedroom there in Lincoln. He called the police, and the cops right in front of our home with their sirens going. There was an ambulance out there. The neighbors were gawking out of their windows. And, one thing you guys got to keep in mind here, they do not see things like this happen in Lincoln, Nebraska. In California, it wouldn't surprise me one bit, but certainly not there. And the cops were laughing, which led me to the whole thing was funny. And they said, "Lady, are you crazy or what? Why would you do something like this?" And you guys, I looked at those cops and I said, "What makes you think that I did it anyway? I was only standing there with glue on my hands, for Christ's sakes." And they said, "You're under arrest for assault and battery." And I said, "You cannot arrest wives in Nebraska for assault and battery against their husbands." I knew better than that. And 2 days later when I got out of jail, I guess I didn't know better than that. And they took that man to the very hospital I worked at in surgery, and he had to have surgery. And one more time, the whole staff saw what Karen did, and they took me to jail, I might add, and it turned out to be a terrible, terrible thing. Those doctors there in Lincoln couldn't get that glue off, and they had to get 2 surgeons down from Creighton University Medical School in Omaha, Nebraska to get that glue off. And, there's a paper about that at Creighton. Anybody in this room is thinking about going to medical school there, you can read about it if you want to. I'd always want a paper written about me, but not like this, I got to tell you. And I was sitting in that jail thinking to myself, I am getting out of this marriage. When this guy comes home from the hospital, he's going to glue something of mine shut. And he would have, too. I'm sorry, but he would have. For those of you who don't know this, that happened to a lady in Kentucky about 3 years ago. It was on the national news, and I was on my way home from work one morning on the Santa Monica Freeway. I had a wreck when I heard it. I thought, my God, better her than me, I got to tell you. But anyway, on the brighter side of things here tonight, like I mentioned earlier, we do have an amends step in this program. And my sponsor made me get on an airplane and fly to Sacramento, California, and make amends to my ex-husband, where he currently lives and stuff. And I tried to tell my sponsor, I'm not sorry that I did that. Therefore, I don't have to make the amends. He said, I don't care whether you're sorry or not. Get on that airplane and get there and do what I'm asking you to do, and maybe one of these days you will be sorry. And I don't tell anybody in this room tonight, when that guy sees me, he kind of backs up, let me tell you. But we were able to sit down and talk and stuff, and I made my amends to him. And I will tell you guys, I walked away from that man. I was free of what I had done to him. I was free of being married to him twice. And I will tell you that the promises in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous started coming true in my life when I made those amends. So I know if this thing works, you just got to do it for it to work. At this time in my life, I got involved with the most bizarre man I have ever met before in my life. This guy told me he was in the mafia. Now, I don't think anybody in Nebraska is in the mafia, for Christ's sakes. And I was lying to him, and he was lying to me. It was your typical alcoholic nightmare is what it was. I was drinking on a daily basis. I was taking Valium for severe tremors I was starting to have. It was beginning to be no more fun, I got to tell you guys. I'm a nurse, and I've studied alcoholism. And I knew all about it before I became one. And it shows me one more time tonight what our book says is so true. Self-knowledge avails us nothing with this disease. It's action that counts. Nowhere in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous do we have a chapter called Into Thinking, but we do have one that's called Into Action. And that is the only reason I'm standing here 18 years sober. And the day came to me, the hospital came up to me, and they said, Karen, we have had all the crap we're going to take off of you. We cannot read about our nursing staff in the paper anymore. Gluing husbands, drunk driving charges, bad checks, all the stuff that you're doing. Everything you do in Lincoln's in the paper, I'm sorry to say. And they knew my game, let me tell you. And they said, you're either going to a treatment center or you longer had this job. Well, you guys, you know what? You don't tell people like me that stuff. And I said, you and what army's going to make me go to a treatment center? And I walked out of a job that I loved more than anything in the whole world, and I cannot say that enough tonight. And I drank and I drank and I died 1,000 times over. I went to work at a nursing home there in Lincoln. And what I'm about ready to share with you guys is something I'm not proud to discuss from any AA podium. It took me years into my sobriety before I would ever mention this. I found myself stealing drugs in that nursing home. I was stealing morphine and Demerol and cocaine and Valium, and I'd get my damn hands on. And if you're wondering why I did that, I couldn't drink at work, and I needed something. I literally could not go more than 3 hours without drinking or using drugs, you guys. The fun was over. It was something I had to do. And I will tell you, the very thought that I might drink again makes the hair on my neck stand straight up. And that's why I'm an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous and stuff. But anyway, I kept that job at that nursing home for a short amount of time. And the day came for me, they walked up to me and they said, Karen, what is wrong with you? You're just weird is what you are. Now, you take good care of the patients. You're a good nurse and stuff. But you're just strange. And I remember thinking to myself, you'd be strange, too, if you had 200 milligrams of Demerol on board. You'd be strange, too. And I threw narcotic keys at them, and I walked out the door before they fired me. And I went to work at Bryan Memorial Hospital there in Lincoln. And you guys, it's a fine, fine facility. And I was drunk on that interview. I got that nursing position. And I'm not talking about falling down drunk. I was just maintaining a certain level of alcohol in my bloodstream that I would not shake and have those violent tremors. That is clearly desperation drinking. Our book describes it vividly. And I was in hot water up to my yin-yang, let me tell you. And the day came for me when I got caught red-handed stealing some morphine from that hospital. And this has got to be, without a doubt, the most humiliating day of my entire life. When they say, you give us your narcotic keys and you get out of this hospital, don't you ever walk back in here again. We're reporting this to the State Board of Nursing, Nebraska. That's exactly what they did. That's exactly what they should have done. My other two jobs should have done it too, as a matter of fact. And to make a long story short here tonight, I lost my nursing license. And to make a long story shorter and short here tonight, I wound up on the streets of Nebraska is what happened to me. And you guys, I spent 2 years on the streets. And I've traveled the Midwest. I've prostituted myself. And I'll guarantee you one thing, that I have seen and done things that no woman should ever see her doing. I'm still so sick in the head sometimes I think to myself, I wouldn't mind seeing some of them again, you know. My sponsor assures me I'm still a very ill person, be thinking that kind of stuff. And, you know, I've been in nut houses, I've been in detoxes, I've been in jails, I've been in institutions. I cannot think of a thing that didn't happen to me on the streets as a practicing female alcoholic. Things happened to me I would not repeat from this podium tonight, but I'm sure that you have the general idea. And 2 years went by for me. And there I was back there in Lincoln, standing on Skid Row, sucking on a bottle of Mad Dog. And I certainly had better things intended for myself than to be doing that, I got to tell you. I will never forget that last day of my drinking as long as I live. And I hope to God it was the last day of my drinking. I apparently was so physically sick I just passed out on the streets is what happened to me. But before that happened, I remember thinking to myself, there was a Hilton Hotel adjacent to that Skid Row area. And I remember thinking 2 years ago, I used to stand on top of the Hilton Hotel and drink martinis with surgeons. What am I doing standing on Skid Row drinking with these people? And I rather imagine those folks felt the same way when they arrived there. And like I said, I can't tell you much about it all. I woke up in an intensive care ward of the very hospital that I was born at, the very hospital I worked at for 19 years, and I will tell you guys clearly that the alcoholic hell for me started the day I got sober. You know, I'm not a very big person. I only weighed 95 pounds the day I got sober, and I was coming off a quart of whatever a day and 200 milligrams of Valium a day. That is a lot of booze, that's a lot of pills, and I had a lot of dying to do, let me tell you. You know, they say that most alcohol withdrawal is over with in 3 days, and perhaps it is for some people. It certainly was not for me. It was going to be a long, long time before I was going to start feeling better. And I laid in that intensive care ward. I had tubes coming out of my belly. They were draining fluid off my liver. I had IVs going. And I found myself in withdrawal that was so bad I cannot begin to tell you guys. And I laid in that intensive care ward, and I shook and I shook and I died for 30 solid days. And I'd scream at those nurses and say, you get me some Librium, you get me some Valium, you get me something. This is absolutely inhumane that anybody should have this kind of withdrawal. And they said, Karen, listen to us. You need to fill every one of those tremors and maybe you'll never do it again. And I did not want to hear that, let me tell you. Then they went on to tell me there's nothing wrong with your heart. It's not throwing any irregularities. You're not getting one single drug from us, so quit asking us for them. But let me tell you what these people got from me, and I will be forever grateful as long as I'm sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. They got 10 members of AA to come and sit with me. And these people never left me day or night for 30 solid days. And I literally fell in love with these people, and I'll tell you why. There was nobody in my life that I got sober. My family wanted nothing to do with me. They've been through it too many times. I'm going to go through it one more time. And, you know, I just want to say something real quick. And I'm not stepping on anybody's toes, please. It's just my opinion only. You know, I hear people say in AA all the time, people say, we don't go unless the alcoholic calls us. Ladies and gentlemen, I am standing here 18 years sober tonight, and I never made any phone call. Let me tell you, the nurses made that phone call for me. I didn't ask them to do it. They did it because they thought they could save my life and stuff. And, you know, I just shudder when I hear people say stuff like that. I hope I never forget where I come from, let me tell you. And, you know, I think if it's good enough for our co-founders, then by God, it's good enough for us. I don't remember that Dr. Bob made any phone call. I think Bill Wilson called him. So, by God, I hope I never forget that and stuff. But anyway, I just love these people and stuff. And at 30 days of sobriety, I walked in that official treatment program at that hospital. I'm a product of a treatment center. I have no opinion on one way or the other. But apparently I went to a fine one because all they talked about was Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's a lot of bad ones out there, you guys, let me tell you. And thank God I went to a good one. And, you know, where I went through treatment, a lot of people got kicked out of treatment for fraternizing. I didn't. Nobody wants to fraternize with an orange person, I can assure you. And they used to bring the patients over to the hospital and they'd say, look at her, see what's going to happen to you if you keep on drinking, look at her. And I thought, how dare you bring people in my room and say stuff like that. But you guys, you know what? In retrospect tonight, I am really glad they did that. I get to think about that before I pick up any drink, let me tell you. But anyway, I walked into group therapy the first time. There was 14 men in that group on there for drunk driving charges and stuff like that. I couldn't identify with these people. I'd done those things years prior to my alcoholism. And they looked at me and they were just horrified when they saw me, let me tell you. I still had IVs going. I could barely walk and I was still shaking, just terribly shaking. And anyway, this one guy looked at me and he said, you think you're better than everybody else here, don't you? And I made a comment to this man that I was to pay for a long, long time in that treatment center when I would not repeat from this podium tonight. And as a direct result of that comment, I found myself in an inpatient 30-day program, you guys, for 7 months. And that's a long time to be in an inpatient 30-day program. And I completed that inpatient program. And I went to an outpatient program. And I went to an evening care program. And I went to an aftercare program. And I found myself a very, very active member of Alcoholics Anonymous in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I wasn't doing one thing the way that you teach people in AA to do it. And I rapidly went through 19 sponsors in that town. I would tell the new people, you don't need to read the book and you don't need to sponsor. We can do what we want to do around here. This is an individual program. And needless to say, I was not real popular with the old-timers in Lincoln, Nebraska. And you guys, the old-timers in AA are so precious to me as I stand here tonight, but not in 1982. I could have cared less one way or the other what these people thought. And you can just pull your stuff around here so long, and these old-timers are going to start nailing you one right after the other. God love the mean old-timers in Alcoholics Anonymous. They literally saved my life, let me tell you. And boy, they are dying off right and left, I got to tell you guys, and they have taught me well. And I'll be eternally grateful, I got to tell you. But this old guy with 29 years of sobriety grabbed me out of an AA meeting one day, and he said, come outside, I want to talk to you. He said, you stay away from the new people. How dare you tell the new people in AA they don't read the book and they don't need a sponsor? He said, you're like a typhoid Mary in AA. Everybody dies around you, but you're able to stay sober somehow. And he said, you stay away from the new people. And he went on to tell me, there's going to be a man from California speaking in Kearney, Nebraska this weekend. His name is Clancy. But this man's speaker, and ask this man if he will sponsor you. He is a master at dealing with jerks like you. And I'd heard all about Clancy, and I wanted nothing to do with him, period, because I knew I was going to be in bad, bad trouble. And I got to tell you guys that my fears have been justified 8,000 times over. And I told this old-timer, I said, who do you think you are that you're going to tell me he's going to be my sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous? He said, if you don't get in that car and go with us Saturday, I'm going to tell everybody in Lincoln how you stole money from an AA meeting. And I'll guarantee I was in that car going to Kearney, Nebraska, and I paid that money back too, by the way. Well, I did pay it back. I really did. And I will tell you guys that from a podium in Kearney, Nebraska, that Clancy literally, and I mean literally, put the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous into my life. My life has never been the same since that talk. And there's a reason for that. For the first time in my sobriety, I was identifying another alcoholic. And as I understand Alcoholics Anonymous, that's what this thing is all about. I know of no finer speaker in the world than my sponsor. I'm not saying that you need to believe that. It's only important that I believe that. And by the end of that talk, I wanted that man for my sponsor. That, ladies and gentlemen, is how God works in my life. I wouldn't have asked that man to sponsor me in a million years. Trust me, I would not have asked him. And I found myself walk across that convention floor and asking that man to be my sponsor. And he looked at me and he said, I don't sponsor crazy people like you. And that's a lie anyway. He sponsors people crazier than I ever thought of being. And I thought to myself, what'd he say that to me for? He doesn't even know me. And I wasn't aware of the fact this old-timer called him 2 weeks prior to him coming to Nebraska and asked him if they brought him, if he would talk to me. He said, of course I will. And he knew my game, let me tell you. And I was standing in my little white dress on, my little white gloves on, acting like an angel. And he saw right through my stuff, let me tell you. And thank God he saw through it. And he said, Karen, I don't like to sponsor people on a long-distance basis, but I'm going to do this for you. Because if I don't do it for you, you'll probably go die somewhere. But he said, I'm going to tell you something, little girl, and you better listen to me real good, because I'm going to say it one time and one time only. You're going to call me every day. I tell you not to call me every day. You are going to read that book. You're going to sponsor people. You're going to become an active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. You're not going to argue with me. You're not going to defend your actions to me. You're going to do what I ask you to do. And if you don't want to do that, then get yourself a different sponsor. And you guys, you want to talk about we stood at the turning point. This is the day when my recovery really did begin in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said 2 words that I almost fell over when I said them. I said, yes, sir. I don't tell people, yes, sir. Trust me, I do not. And one more time, God doing for me what I can't do for myself. Respect's got to start for me somewhere. It might as well start with my sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went back to Lincoln. I became very, very active in AA in the right way. When I was sponsoring a lot of people in that town, I'm not bragging about that. It's not that much fun to sponsor 56 crazy women in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I grew to love those women very, very much, and I'll tell you why. They literally showed me the first 4 years of my sobriety what to do and what not to do in this program, and every one of those women are still sober today, with the exception of one, and she died in a car accident when she was 13 years sober. But she died sober, you guys, and it wasn't because of me. They were active members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and one of the first directions my sponsor gave me, I want you to get that nursing license back. And I tried to tell this man, I cannot go with that kind of humiliation. He said, Karen, are you arguing with me? And I said, no. He said, get up to State Board of Nursing, Nebraska. Tell those people that you've been sober in AA for a year and a half. You'd like the opportunity to get your nursing license back. And you guys, I knew it wasn't going to work, but I did it anyway. And that's without a doubt the most important thing I can say in this room tonight. I did what my sponsor asked me to do, whether I thought it would work or not. And I asked them for my license back. And they looked at me like I had just grown horns on the top of my head, I can assure you. And they said, how many links are you willing to go to? And I had to do a lot, you guys. I had to take crap off people for 2 years that I wouldn't hire to mow my own lawn, if you know the truth. And I had to keep my mouth shut in the process, too. And one of the happiest days of my life occurred 15 years ago last April, when one more time I was stripped in front of the State Board of Nursing, Nebraska, and what they told me brought me to my knees for the first time in Alcoholics Anonymous. They said, welcome home. You're fully reinstated as a registered nurse. And that is a gift from AA. I do not deserve that, but I intend to take it. I can tell you that. And, oh, please, please. Let me tell you guys something. This is your victory, not mine. Clearly your victory. If it wasn't for you, I never ever would have done this stuff. And you walked with me day by day through getting that license back. Let me tell you, many times I wanted to stop. And you said, no, we keep on doing it. We just keep on doing it and stuff. So that's your victory, not mine. But thank you anyway. But anyway, I told my sponsor on the phone one day, I want to move to Southern California. I want to belong to the Pacific Group. I want to work at UCLA in the operating room. I want to be on two of their transplant teams, their heart and liver transplant teams. I want this and I want that. And every single one of those things have come true for me. And those are all gifts from AA. I don't deserve it, but I intend to take it. I can tell you that. And, before I sit down here tonight, I've had many people in this room tonight ask me to tell these two stories. And I just love to tell them, because then I get to share them with members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I get to live it all over again and stuff. But, my sponsor taught me early on, he said, Karen, where are you at with your spiritual program? I said, Clancy, I don't have a spiritual program. I don't believe in God. I can't do that stuff. And he looked at me and he said, little girl, you don't have to want to do anything. You just got to do it anyway. And he flipped open the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he showed me where I get a daily reprieve from this disease, contingent on a spiritual maintenance power, the power greater than myself. And he went on to tell me, there's going to come a day in your life when I can't help you, AA can't help you, and you have better well have a God in your life. You'll be dead from the disease of alcoholism. And you guys, it's happened to me many, many times in my sobriety. And thank God I had a God by the time it happened. And so I said the magic words to my sponsor. I said, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to get on your knees in the morning. I want you to get on your knees at night. And I want you to pray for God's will. Do not pray for things. Pray for God's will and the power to carry that out, just like that step says. And I started doing that. And I didn't feel any connection with God. I felt like a fool doing it, if you wanted the truth. And I talked to my sponsor every day on the phone, and I'd say, this is not working for me. I don't feel any connection with God. And he said, Karen, are you staying sober one day at a time in Alcoholics Anonymous? And I said, well, you know that I am. He said, that's the point of the whole thing. Are you stupid or what? I wasn't playing with a full deck when I arrived here. It took me a long, long time to get these little simple things. And in 1985, I found myself in Montreal, Canada, at the World Conference of Alcoholics Anonymous. And if you guys haven't experienced a World Conference, it's something that none of us should ever admit what a fabulous event it is and stuff. And I'd driven up to Nebraska with about 6 people and 7 alcoholics in one car. We drove straight through to Montreal. I wouldn't do it again. If you paid me $1 million, I wouldn't do it again. But we got up to Montreal. Yes, I would for $1 million. I have to retract that statement. But anyway, we got up to Montreal, and we had no, reservation in any hotel. Those hotels were like a couple $100 a night. We only had $200 apiece. We had no place to stay. And I found myself at that convention center. And we found an apartment to rent for the whole week for $100. I could not believe our good luck and stuff. And I found myself in a great big football stadium at that Friday night meeting. And there was 56,000 sober alcoholics in that football stadium. And I was in awe of Alcoholics Anonymous, in absolute awe of this program. And they were down there in the football field, and they were practicing for a flag ceremony. And alcoholics come from all over the world carrying their national flags. And I know this all sounds real hokey to the new people, but the longer I stay sober, the cornier I get for some reason. And my sponsor was down there helping them practice for that flag ceremony. And I ran down to tell him hi. And he introduced me to people from all over the world in Alcoholics Anonymous. And you guys, I'm from Nebraska, and I was impressed, let me tell you. And I'm impressed today by people from all over the world in AA and stuff. And I ran back up and joined my friends, and that flag ceremony started. And I will never forget this. As long as I live, I'll never forget this. When the United States of America's flag touched the turf of that stadium, I saw 56,000 sober people go absolutely crazy. And I looked around myself. I did not see one dry eye in that football stadium. I saw those old-timers sitting around, all the new people, all the people in between. And they all seemed to be loving this thing so very, very much. And I remember thinking to myself, what is wrong with me? Why can't I feel what these people are feeling? I, too, wanted to love AA, and I could not seem to achieve it somehow. And for the first time in my life, I got tears in my eyes. I did not try and stop. And for the first time, with any amount of sincerity whatsoever, I said, God, thank you for getting me here. Please help me to stay here. Please help me to love this program as much as these people do. And I will tell you guys that in a foreign country, in a foreign land, I came to believe in a power greater than myself by watching and being with the people in Alcoholics Anonymous. I really believe the old adage that we see when we're ready to see, we hear when we're ready to hear, and not before. I also believe the actions my sponsor gave me got me to that point. It's like, do it till you believe it. Do it till till you believe it and stuff. So if you're new here tonight and you're having a problem with a higher power, just do it anyway. You know, something's going to happen for you one of these days, I promise you. But, you know, for one solid second, my world stopped. And I remember that woman who was standing on Skid Row in Lincoln, Nebraska, who literally could not get sober, you guys, who literally could not quit drinking. And there she was, 3.5 years sober. You know, I personally believe that Alcoholics Anonymous is divinely inspired. How could anybody not believe that and been around here as long as I have and stuff? But I have prayed that God every day sincerely since, because I believe what my sponsors taught me. I get a daily reprieve, and that's all that I get. You guys, I had a fabulous job at UCLA. I just retired January the 31st, and I had that job for 15 years. I left there with a great reputation. I had a great career over there and stuff. And my surgeon, I had back surgery 4 years ago, and my back surgeon said, "You're out of there January the 1st. Your back can no longer work in the operating room." So I'm working for Zimmer Surgical Instrument Company now and making big money with those people. I never thought I'd get in that kind of nursing, let me tell you. But anyway, I had a great career over there and stuff. And, you know, my sponsor taught me early on. He said, "You have got to do what God gives you to do, Karen." And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He said, "Why don't you answer the phone just for starters, you know?" And, you know, when I got sober, I didn't have a telephone, you guys. It took me a long time to get a telephone in Alcoholics Anonymous. By the time I got one, I sure didn't want to answer it. It was bill collectors. And, you know, I was $86,000 in debt in Alcoholics Anonymous when I got sober. And I'm happy to report here tonight, as a result of answering telephones, I am $86,000 out of debt in Alcoholics Anonymous. I made my last payment last March of $800 to Nebraska, and that's it. I'm out of debt. It only took me 16 short years to do it, you know, but I've done it. And, you know, my sponsor does not believe in bankruptcy. I'm not knocking anybody that has to do that. I know people have to do that sometimes and stuff, but my sponsor told me, "You want me for a sponsor, you pay the money back." And I saw no way out of that, but you know, I was able to find a way to do it and stuff. And, you know, it's like paying for dead horses everywhere, I got to tell you guys. But, boy, I know the sense of freedom as I stand here tonight, let me tell you. And, you know, I just bought a brand new car through a Bank of America loan, and I bought it there in L.A. And at the dealership, I told the guy I want that car, and he was running the numbers and stuff. And he said, "Did you used to have a little credit problem?" And I said, "Oh, you have no idea." And he said, "Well, apparently you paid it all back, and that's all we care about." And I drove a brand new car out of that Honda place and stuff. So, you know, I'm trying to give some hope to the new people. When I saw no way out of it, by God, there's another side to every story, let me tell you. So I'm just real happy I paid that money back, I got to tell you. But anyway, my sponsors taught me to answer the telephone. And about 9 years ago, this one particular week, I'd worked 72 hours. And, you know, we're like we're too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. I was a bitch is what I was. And I worked the night shift over there. And this one particular night I had off, and I went to meeting early in the evening. I went home and I went to bed early. I was just exhausted. And the phone rang about 2 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, I am not answering that telephone. It's my boss wanting me to come to work. I can't even think straight. I'm so tired. And this voice in my head said, "Pick up the telephone. Somebody's in trouble." And you guys have taught me well, I got to tell you. So I picked up the telephone, and I'm so glad I did. You guys, the most precious thing happened to me that's ever happened my whole life to me. And sure enough, it was my boss. And she said, "I've got 18 people sick over here tonight. We're going to do a liver transplant on a girl that's about 3 years old. I have nobody to do it. Now get over here and help me." I said, "I am not coming over there. I've worked 72 hours. I can't even think straight." And she hung up on me is what she did. You know, I was going to call my sponsor, but I don't want to talk to him about nothing at 2 o'clock in the morning. I know what he'd have told me. Nobody ever died from lack of sleep, Karen. Now I'd have to say, "Well, there's a first time for everything, Clancy," you know. But I didn't have to go through that. I know better. I just went to work, and I'm so glad I did. But I got over there, and I sent my orderly upstairs to bring our little patient down to surgery. And he called me in the back, and he said, "You're not going to believe all the people with this family and stuff." And I thought, well, that's nice if they had the support. I was so crabby, you guys. And we had a jet come in from New York with a liver for this child. Had some time to kill and stuff. And so I finally went out and got her. And the first thing I noticed was there was like 80 people with this family. And I thought, how highly unusual at 4 o'clock in the morning. How highly unusual any time, day or night, if you want to know the truth. And the next thing I noticed was the mother. She had the most beautiful blue eyes I have ever seen before in my life. And the dad was good looking and stuff. And I looked down at my little patient. And I got to tell you guys that Alcoholics Anonymous has taught me to love at a level I never, ever, ever dreamt possible myself. And I ever so gently fell in love with this little baby girl. And she was so sick she couldn't lift her head off the pillow. She was so sick and dying from some strange liver thing and needed a transplant. And I remember thinking to myself, and you didn't want to be here, you selfish person. I just hated myself at that moment. And she had the most beautiful blue eyes. And in her little arms she had a bear. And she had a blanket wrapped around that bear, hanging on to him for dear life, let me tell you. And I'd been over and I talked to her and I said, "Oh, you brought your little bear down to surgery," and tried to tell me her little bear was going to have a liver transplant. And I said, "Oh, you're both going to have one." And she said, No, just the bear, you know. But anyway, we sent the family out the waiting room, and that mom was in absolute hysterics, I got to tell you guys. And this little girl looked at me and she said, "Why is my mommy crying? Go tell my mommy not to cry." And because of Alcoholics Anonymous, what I've learned in this program, I was able to tell that little baby the the truth. And I said, your mommy's crying because your mommy loves you so very, very much. And that seemed to settle her down a little bit and stuff. And we have an anesthesiologist at UCLA that loves to play with the kids, you guys. He is just a delight to work with and stuff. And so when she got her IV started, the bear got an IV started. And his bag was called bear juice. She thought that was real funny. And when she went to sleep, the bear went to sleep. And it was really quite painless for her, if you want to know the truth. And I must tell you guys, that 16-hour transplant did not go well. We almost lost that baby a couple times, did a blood loss. I have never seen a team of people pull together like we pulled together for that baby that night. And 16 hours later, she went up to her room with not much hope at all. She'd lost a tremendous amount of blood, you guys. And boy, we said some prayers on that one, let me tell you. And I became obsessed with this baby, and I had to see her again. And, you know, we have a rule at UCLA. You may not get involved with these transplant patients. They want where the organs come from. We cannot tell them. It's best not to see them after surgery. Now, I'll tell anybody in this room tonight that I'm real good at breaking rules now, aren't I? And I thought, I'm just going to go up and see how she's doing. I'm not going to talk to anybody. And so when she was 6 days post-op from that transplant, I went to that baby's room. And you guys, I opened the door of that child's room, and I could not believe what was in front of my face. My God, the power of God, the power of God. Here was this little baby girl. It was the first time she'd been up since her surgery. She was jumping up and down in her crib. She had her diapers hanging around her knees. She had a baby bottle in one hand. She had that bear in the other arm, and she put Band-Aids all over this bear. He had Band-Aids on his eyes, his ears, his nose, and I mean everywhere. And I stood in that hall, and I just cried like a baby. It is not cool to see the nursing staff bawl, let me tell you. And that whole room full of people in there. And something caught my eye out of the corner of my eye. And I'll be damned if our book wasn't sitting on that kid's dresser. And it all made sense to me now. And I was in that room like a flash, and I said to the mom, I said, whose book is that? And she said, well, that's my book. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So is my husband. Her sponsor was there. His sponsor was there. And those 75, 80 people had driven 500 miles to be with his family. They were not from the LA area. I don't recall ever being quite as proud to be a member of AA as I was at that particular moment and stuff. And I asked the mom, I said, how long have you been sober? And she said, 5 years today. I thought, oh my God, her baby up for the first time. What a fabulous birthday present and stuff. And I walked over to this little girl, and she stopped dead in her tracks, and she said, go away, I'm not sick anymore. And I had my scrub clothes on, and it scared the hell out of her is what I did. And I said, I didn't come up here to hurt you. I came up here to see how you're doing. And she gave me her little bear, you guys. She said, you take him home and take care of him. He's so sick he needs a nurse to take care of him. And I thought, you know, I told the mom, I said, I can't go down, take that baby bear home. My God, that bear went through this baby's liver transplant. We had it by her little head, her whole entire surgery, you guys, in a plastic bag and stuff. And she said, Karen, please take it. She wants you to have it. She's got 50 bears in this room. And she did indeed have 50 bears in that room. And I felt like a fool walking down the hall of that bear. But I will tell you guys, that bear is my most prized possession in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. Then it got to be too important to me. And when it gets to being too important to us, we got to get rid of it, folks, let me tell you. And my little granddaughter said to me, Grandma, can I have that bear? And I said, no, it's Grandma's bear. I thought, oh my God, I can't believe I said that to my grandbaby. And she says, please let me have him, Grandma. I want him so bad. And she knows the whole story, you guys. And I said, Brandy, I'll buy you 100 bears. It's my bear. And she said, but I don't want any other bear. I want that bear. And it got so bad for me, I had to talk to my sponsor about it. What's a 50-year-old woman talking to her sponsor about a bear for? You know, my sponsor told me, quit being so selfish. Give her the bear. You got the memory. And I thought, I'm getting a different sponsor. That's the last straw. Anyway, I gave her my little bear and stuff, and he sits in Lincoln, Nebraska on her dresser, Band-Aids intact. I get to visit him a couple times a year. So anyway, I thought to myself, I need to reciprocate here. I obviously was not prepared for a birthday party, and I remembered something that was in my pocket that my sponsor gave me when I was 5 years sober. I was like 9 years sober when this happened. It was a medallion for 5 years of sobriety, and the reason it's in my pocket at night at work is because there are narcotic keys next to that medallion, and I don't tell anybody in this room tonight that when I open that cupboard sometimes my eyes light up like firecrackers, and I can grab on that and remember where I'm coming from here. And my sponsor gave me that medallion when I was 5 years sober. I was 9 years sober now. I'm a selfish woman, I'm sorry to say. I could not seem to find the woman that was special enough, in my opinion, to give my 5-year medallion to. And I knew I'd found her, let me tell you. And I gave her that medallion. I said, you know, my sponsor gave me this. I'd like you very much to have it. She said, oh, Karen, I can't take that. My God, Clancy gave you that. And I said, no, I want you to have it. And I really, really meant that. That's what you eventually do for me here and stuff. And the nurses got wind of all this. We got a cake for the mother. We celebrated her 5 years of sobriety. I got my sponsor on the telephone. Within 3 hours, he had about 50 cars in front of UCLA, and I cannot begin to tell you how proud I was to take those people to my home group that night, the Pacific group. There's been no more contact with them. It's got to be that way for many, many reasons. But I know that little girl is doing very, very well and stuff. And, you know, the point I'm trying to make here, if I hadn't picked up that telephone, I'd have missed the whole damn thing. How many times in my life have I missed stuff because I wouldn't take simple actions just like answering the telephone? That'll make me crazy if I think about it long enough. But, you know, people say to me all the time, why do you keep doing it, Karen? Why do you keep doing it? And I know of no greater thing to say to them than where our 12th tradition says long form, so that this to the end, that my great blessings may never spoil me, that I may forever live in thankful contemplation of him who presides over us all. And there's more reasons than that for me. You're the ones that walked me when nobody else would walk with me. You held my hand when nobody else would hold my hand. And you told me that you loved me. And I need you as desperate as I need you in 1982. You've taught me how to live. You've taught me how to love. You've taught me how to keep my pants up and all those things. And I don't do any of those things very well. But I'll tell you the one thing that I do with 200% absolute perfection, and that is this, that I love this program more than the whole world. And it's truly a story from an alcoholic hell I cannot even describe. I have truly been given, just like the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, I have truly been given the keys to the kingdom. And I'm going to say one more thing, and I'm going to shut my mouth here. It has been one hell of a walk from Skid Row, Nebraska to where I stand in Laughlin, Nevada tonight. And I think that but for the grace of God and Alcoholics Anonymous, I would have missed it all. Thank you for having me, and thank you for my life.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside. Then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.